Hello, welcome to the ACE Hot Topic webinar series. My name is Brian Mandryer. I'm the Association of Cancer Executives Executive Director. I'd like to thank Varian for their continued support of ACE and for putting together today's webinar. If you're new to the Association of Cancer Executives, ACE is a national organization committed to the leadership development of oncology executives through continuing education, professional networking, designed to promote an improvement in patient delivery care. ACE is currently offering 2 meetings per year, the first of which is the International Oncology Leadership Conference, which will be held in Rome, Italy later this year, November 14th through the 16th, and registration for that meeting will be opening up later this month. We also have the ACE annual meeting, which in 2022 will be the 28th iteration of that meeting, and that will be held in Charleston, South Carolina from January 23rd through the 25th, 2022. Registration information for that meeting will be late this summer. Both of these meetings are scheduled to be in person, which we are very excited about. And for more information on these events and also membership opportunities, you can visit cancerexecutives.org, and I'll provide links in the chat box during the webinar to get more information on ACE. And now I'd like to introduce today's moderator, which is Nancy Bookbinder. Nancy is an ACE board member. She's the Member Services Committee Chair, which oversees the ACE webinar series. And she's also the first recipient of the ACE Marcia Fountain Award for Excellence in Oncology Administration. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nancy. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. We'd like to welcome everyone to our series, both participants and panelists, brought to you, as Brian said, by the Association of Cancer Executives. Goals of our webinar today are to gain learnings and guidance from our panelists related to the topic of how does the vaccine change cancer care in a COVID world. And importantly, we'd like to hear from the webinar participants as well. Today, we're going to begin with a polling question, then we'll have a presentation from 2 of our panelists. That will be followed by a panel discussion. I'll be asking questions, but most importantly, we'd like to hear from those of you who are participating in the seminar. We'll pause a few times during the panel discussion for polling questions, and Brian will be asking those questions via the polling, and you will see the results as they come up. But we request when you use the chat function for questions, please just go ahead and submit your question when you think of it, rather than waiting to the end. That way we can see how many we've got coming in, how much time we need to make sure that we hear your voice at the end. I'm very pleased to present our distinguished Varian panelists today. First, we have Andrew Shogan, who's the Senior Vice President, Multidisciplinary Oncology for Varian. He was appointed to that position in April of 2021, but he's been with Varian since June of 2019. Many of you may know him through the acquisition of Cancer Treatment Services International, CTSI. He was Andrew was a co-founder of CTSI, and he served in many management roles in that organization with increasing responsibility. He holds a bachelor's degree in economics and psychology from Middlebury, and also he has his MBA in finance from Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania. Deepak D. Kuntia, who is a physician, is the Senior Vice President and Chief Medical Officer. Many of you may know him for Varian's Medical Affairs Program. He works closely with product, regulatory, business development, and innovation teams, providing clinical and scientific guidance in all areas of clinical risk and opportunities, safety reviews, adverse experience reporting, product lifecycle reviews, clinical protocol design, mergers and acquisitions, and strategy. Dr. Kuntia joined Varian in 2013. He holds a medical degree from the University of Illinois College of Medicine, and he completed his radiation oncology residency at the Cleveland Clinic Foundation. Stacy Stordahl is the Vice President for Reimbursement and Market Access for Varian Medical Systems. Stacy works in Varian's Governmental Affairs Office in Washington, D.C., my former home. She's been there since 2011. She leads reimbursement and market access teams dedicated to expanding patient access to Varian technologies around the globe. Stacy has built a strong team for reimbursement and market access focused on strategy development for, strategy development for coding coverage, payment, evidence generation, and value propositions for Varian Technologies. Andrew and Dee are going to provide us with a presentation, and I believe we're going to start with a polling question. And now we're going to lead into our presentation, which I think is being loaded.
All right, thanks, Nancy. Can everyone see my screen? All right. So one of the questions we've been getting, and first of all, thanks again for having us here. And as we put the presentation together, we thought about giving a little bit of an update on with the recent closing of the transaction with Siemens Healthineers and Varian, just an idea of the strategy of Siemens and Varian together. And then I'll hand it over to Dee to talk more on the clinical side, and then we'll want to tie that into the questions of the COVID impact on cancer care in general, and tie that a little bit to our strategy together. So as we think about Siemens and Varian together, one of the major things that we often hear about is the scale of the two businesses together, as well as the impact we can have on a global basis. So here's just some statistics to show about how we're working together and the really massive scale between the two organizations. On the top left-hand side, you see 54,000 employees with Siemens Healthineers, the healthcare vertical that spun out of Siemens' parent company, along with 11,000 employees from Varian, creates over 65,000 employees together across 70 countries, all connected with the purpose of bringing better cancer care, better healthcare to patients globally. In the middle of the top row, you see sort of the way that we all measure that scale. Siemens has measured that scale on patient touches per hour, which is an incredible number of over 240,000 patients per hour globally are touched by a piece of Siemens technology or equipment. On the Varian side, we've always measured patient touches in terms of radiation therapy and overall therapy within cancer. And at this point, we're touching over 4 million patients per year, and that's also growing rapidly. From a revenue perspective and a scale perspective, we're now over $17 billion between us, and all of those dollars are a reflection of the activity as our technology and our services get out into the market and impact patients. And then from an installed base perspective and customer touches, over 70% of clinical decisions are made using some type of technology one of the two companies provides within the oncology market, and both companies are very much market leaders in the spaces that they're in. So the strategy is to do this all and work together really across the cancer care continuum. So as we think about what can you expect from us as a group, it's to partner with providers and partner with management and partner with physicians who are touching patients every day, but across the cancer care continuum, from early detection and prevention through diagnosis, through therapy and monitoring, and through follow-up. And the combined company will invest in all of this with cancer care in mind through the Varian perspective. We think about Siemens Healthineers and their portfolio. They have a very large, very comprehensive diagnostic imaging portfolio, as well as lab and path diagnostics portfolio. And then they have an advanced therapies group that includes some therapeutic medical devices in other specialty areas outside of oncology, like cardiology and neurology. They also have a very good AI science group and overall clinical research group with a lot of R&D funding and a lot of effort behind their innovation. And they've put together value partnerships, which is noted in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide, which is a way to enter in long-term partnerships for the technology adoption and clinical workflow activities of customers. From the Varian side, we've been a market leader in cancer care, specifically in radiation oncology for a very long time, and moving more and more into a multidisciplinary oncology operation across both the medtech devices as well as the hardware, software, and services that come along with that. And most recently, where I came from as Varian acquired CTSI and as our group has come into Varian, now from a multidisciplinary point of view, we're able to partner with customers into the clinical workflow more and more to provide partnership in the use of the technology that both companies will now put to the market together. From a Varian marketing point of view and a Varian positioning point of view in the market, we've launched this intelligent cancer care platform, and it's a way to think about what does intelligent cancer care mean to our customers and ultimately to patients. So one of the pillars is a personalized treatment with no compromises, right? That means that no cancer patient is the same and they should not be treated the same. The second is increasing access to care. So at the same time that no cancer patient is the same, there's a very strong recognition that not every patient has the same access to care either. And so we envision a world where every cancer patient has direct access to the best care, and a lot of the products and services that we're bringing to the market are to drive this increased access. The third is to make data-driven decisions. So if we think about an intelligent approach to cancer care, it's fighting cancer with a more intelligent approach, a smarter approach, and a data-driven approach, and using that data and the analysis of that data to make better decisions, as well as develop better products and services we can give to our customers to help them make better decisions. From a strategic perspective, this leap in cancer care that we talk about working with Siemens is addressing growing unmet needs in the market. If we grow faster as a business, it means we're touching more patients, and that's a really important part, as I've said, of what we're doing from a strategy. One of the two of the ways we look at this are on this slide. And the left-hand side, we think about from a global perspective, a growing demand for cancer care because of the number of new cases per year. And the trends that are driving these new cases are earlier diagnosis, new treatments that are available, and so a wider number of patients that are able to be treated, greater patient awareness from a global perspective. But still, the new cases don't always come with the accessibility. So if you look at the blue icons versus the gray icons on the left-hand side, that's to denote access. And so thinking about from 18 million to 30 million new cases over the next 20 years, that's a 67% growth, but we have a similar issue from a ratio perspective of how many patients actually have access to care. And that's one of the things that when we talk about unmet need, we want to address as a company. The second thing that we're trying to address is access to better survival rates, right, to better outcomes. So the graph on the bottom right shows increase in survival over time across several different disease sites, decade by decade from the 1970s to today. And in an ideal world, this is if patient has access to care, they also have access to these types of outcomes. But in reality, not only is access lacking, but also the right types of decisions, the right types of technology available to lead to these outcomes is not always there for patients. And so we also want to address the market and its unmet needs by trying to help customers and providers overcome barriers that they face in going to address this growing demand. And that's what's listed in the top right-hand corner in the blue box. So whether it's capital constraints, the clinical skills gap that exists in certain parts of the market, whether those are more rural markets, whether those are emerging markets, the technology adoption in terms of acquiring equipment or acquiring technology and software is one thing, but using it and using it as effectively as possible is another. And so the training and education, as well as the long-term partnership, is something that we're focused on. All of that, again, trying to drive and improve patient access, which is another one of the barriers. When we say how we'll achieve this as a company together with Siemens, on the left-hand side of this chart, it's the same chart as far as growing and addressing this growing unmet need. In the center, it's covering the entire care continuum. So not only thinking about this from a medical device perspective, but as both companies have been doing over the years, innovating with software, innovating within the services, bringing some AI technology into the decision-making to make our services more scalable. All of those things will allow us to fill in the gaps across the cancer care continuum and provide a much more comprehensive portfolio over time. And then, of course, it's taking a customer base back to the first slide on scale, a employee base of 65,000 people, a customer base that's very large, and those 65,000 people serve every day, and being able to then scale more and more services through that channel, again, driving impact to patients. So Siemens and Varian together for an overall scope, if you think about the spectrum from prevention through follow-up and all the treatment and diagnosis in between, across the clinical specialties that are listed here in terms of radiology, interventional radiology, radiation oncology, medical oncology, and a lot of other specialties outside of cancer care, as well as the clinical conditions that we can address that are in the middle there. We have the devices, the software, and the services as a group to put that together to bring this all to the market, bring all of these solutions to customers. And so just from a strategy perspective, that's where Varian together with Siemens only accelerates the vision that we've had from a Varian perspective of a world without fear of cancer. And the two companies have been spending a lot of time before this transaction closed, mapping out how we will work together into the market to bring more to the market together. With that, I'll hand it over to you, Dee, to give a few more clinical details around some of this strategy.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks everyone for joining us today. One thing COVID has done for us, it has emphasized the disparities that happen in healthcare. And we have this philosophy where you live shouldn't determine if you live. And so as part of that, we are looking at cancer holistically and being powered with the broader Siemens Healthineers organization, it really allows us to deliver on this vision. If we look at lung cancer as an example, the way we address it involves everything from screening to diagnosis to therapy to treatment planning and also follow-on care. So if you look at cancer in isolation with just therapy or just screening, you'll miss out on opportunities on how to maximize the outcomes for the patient. So this is really how we're going to be able to deliver more care, better care, faster care to everyone. Next slide, please. Now, if we look at radiation as an example, so just narrowing in on one area of our portfolio, imaging is an incredibly important tool. We use that routinely to figure out where the beams need to go, the extent of the disease. But as tools advance and we start migrating into the field of radiomics, we're going to even learn more about imaging, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The treatment planning side of it is really one of the core strengths of the business, ensuring that we give all the radiation to where the tumor is and not where the normal tissues are. Being able to deliver therapy with a variety of different radiation techniques has been part of our DNA. But really what's growing is the assessment and the follow-up. How do we learn from everything that was done in the past to create new tools that can be used to optimize healthcare? Next slide, please. Now, one of the newer modalities, really the fourth pillar outside of surgery, medical oncology, and radiation, is interventional radiology. This is, where we use catheters to ablate tumors. We can introduce radiopharmaceuticals. We can even introduce drugs directly into the tumor. And this is a very rapidly growing part of the cancer delivery system. And so we are taking the knowledge of the last 72 years in radiation oncology and really helping to apply these principles to advancing the interventional radiology business. Next slide, please. Now, as far as the way we do this, it's largely with creating collaborations with our customers. We look at the problems that are happening in the clinic, but now we look at it from a much broader lens, not just on the therapy side. How can we improve workflow? How can we allow the doctors to see more patients in a shorter period of time? How do we ensure that each patient is treated with the best possible care? And this is largely driven by our collaborations. We have over 4,000 collaborations globally, and this has really helped to influence our innovation that happens. We're even able to translate things directly from the lab into the clinics, and we'll talk a little bit about that later today. Next slide. And one of these areas that we've been able to take from the lab and into clinic is flash radiation. And flash involves giving a very high dose of radiation in a very short period of time. For example, if we were to give standard radiation for prostate cancer, it could take 8 weeks. But what would happen that if instead of delivering it over 5 minutes a day for 8 weeks, we delivered it all 8 weeks of radiation in under 1 second? That is what we're talking about with flash. And that involves some very unique biologic changes that potentially could reduce the normal tissue response, so fewer side effects, but still maintaining clinical efficacy. And so we started our first in human trials at Cincinnati Children's Hospital just a few months ago. Next slide. I'll turn it back over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Dee. Just a few more slides to wrap up and also sort of move closer to the topic of COVID and its impact on our business as well as on our customers. One of the things that we've seen with COVID, and we've heard this from customers time and time again, is it's really catalyzing the need for technology adoption. It's really accelerating a lot of the trends that we've seen in healthcare. I know all of us have heard that or said that many times now over the last 12 months. And one of the ways we depicted that on this slide and the way that we think about it is that we used to be more reactive, more individually driven, and more feeling the need to be on site and on site to interact with people, on site to deliver something. We now are thinking about how can we scale quicker by being more productive, more process driven, and more remote over time. And so we've been investing and moving our investments into more technology driven solutions, whether that's through the use of AI or predictive analytics, whether it's through improving and increasing the way that we interact remotely with people, with customers, with patients, and then also enhancing our digital learning capabilities. We feel like COVID has really been one of the things that's actually helped unlock some of where this market was already moving, and we had been hearing from customers over the years, but it allowed us to really bring it into focus, I think, as it has for all of you, where some really targeted investments here could really move things a lot faster. And then the last slide, sort of on that same note, but just from an engagement model standpoint, Siemens Healthineers has been using value partnerships, what they call value partnerships now, over the last 5 years or so to really enter long-term partnerships with customers where it's not just a transactional selling a piece of equipment, but it's really working together to then manage that equipment and operationalize that equipment. We've been doing that from the Varian side through the engagement model called Oncology as a Service, where we bring hardware, software, and services together into a holistic solution that, again, is in a long-term partnership, 5-10 years long, where we really hold hands together, work together in the clinic, and partner with the adoption of technology. And in this concept of optimizing operations, expanding and growing the business, advancing the technology, and kind of bringing that through these various elements. COVID has also made the demand and the discussion with customers from our perspective, right, around these types of things more acute, and thinking about how can we partner together as a device provider, medical device provider, as a technology provider, as a clinical services partner, but how do we do that over a really long period of time since we're all facing similar challenges, maybe just in different roles, and really bring that together in partnership. So I wanted to say that I think COVID has increased the demand for this type of partnership, and it's on us, the burden's on us to invest in the right way and put the partnership the right way with the clinical community to put these partnerships out there. But I think between the remote capabilities and this less transactional, more partnered structure, we're seeing that again and again, and we don't think that will go away even as COVID subsides here over time. With that, I think we're finished with the presentation part and would love to get into the panel discussion. Nancy, if I hand it back over to you, I'm going to do my best to unshare my screen here.
Thank you, and thank you for that overview. It's very helpful to provide a setting for the discussion today. So Dee, can we start with a question asking you, how has COVID impacted cancer care, following up to what Andrew was talking about?
Well, thanks, Nancy. I think the biggest thing that we've seen, especially initially, is that, patients or, potential patients stop getting screening. And there's been quite a bit written about this. There was just a JAMA Oncology paper that looked at cancer screening across hospitals and clinics throughout the globe, and really seeing major decreases in screening for breast cancer, colorectal cancer, prostate cancer. That really has, made us worry a bit about whether in the future we're going to be seeing more advanced stages of disease. And in fact, we are seeing some early signs of that. That's one big area where we saw some changes. The other is the practice of medicine was altered. We are now doing much of our practice via telemedicine or video conferences before, and that's not something that maybe it was being done, but not embraced like it was today. So those are just a couple of examples of ways things have changed.
Thank you. For the panel as a whole, and also following up on some of the things Andrew talked about in the presentation, what do you see your customers doing related to increasing volumes in radiation oncology? What resources have you seen them employ to maintain plan quality and to keep up with increasing workflow?
Yeah. Maybe I can start real quickly on some of the clinical things that we've seen customers do. One thing that we've seen, and this also has recently been published in the Lancet Oncology, looking at a higher use of hypofractionation or even extreme hypofractionation. So, we talked a little bit about how we would give radiation over 8 to 9 weeks for prostate cancer. Well, customers are starting to do that in 25 or fewer treatments. Breast cancer being done in 3 weeks instead of 6 weeks, and those trends, were definitely accelerated during COVID-19.
Maybe I would add in with our clinical partnerships that we have, and I think in the demand, kind of as I was saying, in the use of the technology or the movement to more remote, as customers globally have dealt with various forms of lockdowns or reductions in mobility of both patients, but also staff and also the teams that are there to provide care. We've seen this increased demand and ask for help in how do we operate day to day, and so not only within our existing partnerships, but also on the product side, a more hands-on, I think, approach to solving problems in the short term is something that we've seen, and that's actually caused us to revisit some of the innovation, decisions that I was talking about earlier, where, okay, well, now maybe there's something here that won't go away, and we need to invest some dollars there and work with our customers over time. And so we've seen customers have to adjust, and we've tried to be there with them. And the other point related to innovation I would make is I think that we've in the past at times, all of us on the business side of this, I think we've thought about innovation as a little bit of a longer term roadmap where we are trying to do something, say it's AI science, and it takes years to get something to market in the right way. I think we're starting to think about use cases in the short term that really actually can impact customers quickly in the context of COVID, but also again in the way that some of these dynamics may not change. And so a little bit of a more rapid innovation cycle is something we've tried to adjust to.
And I would just add, Nancy, as we look at some of the new technologies and the ways that our customers are doing things remotely that they hadn't previously been doing, we've had to work with governments around the globe to make sure that those physicians, those providers could get reimbursement for those services. And patients, their insurers were covering those remote visits. So it's really kind of changed the culture and the way of thinking.
So Stacy, has that been a smooth process? Have there been bumps along the way? Where do you see that going?
I think early on in the public health emergency, there was the immediate reaction that we needed to loosen some of these guidelines. And now I think as folks are getting vaccinated, we're definitely going back to more in-person medicine. But there's an understanding that maybe we need to build into our system kind of where we go from here. What does the world look like once we're all vaccinated? I think we're not going to go back to as much in person as we used to see. So we have to find that balance, I think.
Thank you. Moving the topic to adaptive therapy, thinking about those who are interested in adaptive therapy who purchased an Ethos system, where do you think the market is going related to adopting adaptive therapy? Is it really a therapy for all, or is it still a boutique technique in radiation?
Maybe I can address that. It's one of these things where if you had unlimited resources, And the technology stack was such that it wasn't a burden to the clinic's workflow, meaning they could do it in a similar time setting as a non-adaptive treatment. I think most people would end up doing it. The reason for that, just to explain a little bit more what adaptive treatments we're talking about are, it is if you were to, every time we do radiation, for example, we could capture an image prior to treating to make sure that the patient is lined up properly. Now, if we see something that's off, like for example, in the case of prostate cancer, if there is more urine in the bladder on a particular day, the prostate might be off target, or there might be more or less rectum in the high dose area where the beams are coming in. Well, normally we wouldn't be able to adjust for something like that because it just takes too long. It's a several hour process to come up with a new treatment plan. Well, with adaptive radiation, we can actually use some of these new computer hardware technology, imaging technology, and AI to actually generate a brand new plan while the patient is sitting on the table. So that way they can actually be treated based on the way their anatomy is right now. Now, how does this help? Well, it'll ensure that you're not missing the target. So hopefully that translates into better clinical outcomes in terms of curing cancers. But it also allows you to reduce the amount of normal tissues that are in the area. So there'd be less bladder, less rectum in this example within the field. So if you could do that on every patient, and the technology would allow you to do it quickly, it's almost rude not to use it. The problem, though, is that it does have additional expense on the system. And so how do you go about selecting which patients are most likely to have a demonstrable clinical effect? And that's where we're working on a consortium running multiple trials that are in process to help identify which patients are going to see the most benefit from this type of technology.
Thank you. I think we have some polling questions. So Stacy, related to the conversation about ethos, what is Varian involved with at this point in creation for adaptive therapy pain?
Sure. So like most new technologies, the current coding for radiation treatment planning does not appropriately account for the adaptive therapy, the online treatment planning that is done on the ethos. So we have been working with other stakeholders, our professional society, ASTRO, and our early adopters and our clinical partners to help determine what appropriate coding would look like so that our customers can appropriately get paid for adaptive radiotherapy in the future.
Thank you. Switching to alternative payment models, where do you see the APM going? Is there going to be a delay? Will it happen?
So yeah, that polling question was interesting, right? Because it seems like a lot of providers have had other things on their mind, understandably, obviously. So we believe that the radiation oncology alternative payment model will go into effect on January 1st, 2022. That's what we're hearing. I think if we've learned anything in the last year and a half, and that is that, things change pretty quickly. So, could there be another delay? Maybe. I think it depends on how the vaccinations go and, whether we're able to get back to normal. We have been working with this administration. They are interested in potentially making some changes to the model that was proposed. And so we have an opportunity. And so we've been meeting with the new administration, the new officials at CMS. We've been taking clinical partners in to meet with them and meeting with other stakeholders to see if we might be able to make some tweaks to the model that will hopefully enable our clinical partners to be successful, at least those that were chosen to participate. But we do anticipate, we're still planning for a January 1 implementation, so we'll see.
Stacy, can you speak to any of the potential tweaks, either in a specific or broad way? Because I think people would be pretty interested in hearing that.
Yeah, sure. So, I think the major policy issue that we'd really like to see addressed is the size of the discount. So, most providers are looking at a pretty significant discount to their payment rates. And so we've been working with Astro and other stakeholders to advocate for something that is probably less than 3%. And is really more in line with some of the other alternative payment models that we've seen previously. And so we're going to hope to see if we can have a reduction in those discount factors, or at a minimum, maybe do a phased-in approach so people aren't hit all at once. Given some of the issues that we've talked about today, where we're concerned that patients may be delayed care and you're going to have later stage cancer patients, having significant cuts at this point could be really detrimental to some providers. So we really want to take a more cautious approach to the alternative payment model and make sure that those customers that are participating can really be successful.
Thank you. I think we have another polling question. So we would be interested to hear from the panelists about their response to what they just saw and what they're really seeing related to capital purchasing at this time.
Yeah, I don't know, Andrew, maybe this one's more up your area.
Yeah, I was going to say, and unfortunately, I'm not able to see on my side the polling question, so I didn't see the result. But I think that we're expecting that there's going to be a purchasing cycle that returns somewhat back to normal, right, in terms of the level of affordability as well as the need to refresh technology and improve technology and continue to invest. But it will not return all the way back to normal, I think, is the point of view that we've had. So there's going to be kind of an elongation of the cycle, and there's going to be more and more sort of an operationalizing of the purchasing cycle, I think, is part of the way that we see it. We see this in some markets already, but where CapEx and a cycle where you kind of have a purchase and then there's years of time using that technology, and then another purchase will become more of a longer term spread out kind of solution by solution or technology by technology. And so there will still be large CapEx purchases for equipment, but they might be structured in a different way. But then there will also be engagements, along the way with different solutions that come in smaller pieces, whether that's SaaS software, whether that's services that are built into the partnership, right, or other solutions that are reactive to something in the market. And actually, the APM topic we just talked about is part of that, right? If there's a adjustment to rates and there's a kind of a shock to the system there, that plus COVID makes affordability in a traditional model maybe even more challenged, then that will change the way that the cycle looks. But I don't think we expect, again, being blind to the poll answer here, but I don't think we expect there to be a major change in the willingness to invest or the need to invest in new technologies. Just that how that transpires and what it's structured like is something that will probably continue to evolve.
Dee, could you expand and build on that relative to what you see coming in the next 12 to 18 months in radiation oncology? How will volumes be affected? Do you think providers will be taking care of patients who present with later stage disease?
Yes, thanks for the question, Nancy. So in January, Astro actually did a survey of over 100 physicians, and they looked at, they specifically asked that question, and 66% of the physicians surveyed said they're already seeing patients with more advanced disease. So that, I think, is a given that we're going to see that. It's a matter of how long will that go on for, and we think there will be about a year where we're going to start to see before we start to see screenings back in place and having an impact on sort of the later stage cancer. So another way of saying it is that I think in about a year from now we'll start to see a more standard mix of stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 cancers. The things that are less, I think I have less line of sight on is, yes, we have seen a return of more in-person visits in the clinic, but whether or not telemedicine or remote medicine, goes back to the way it was in the heat of COVID, where the majority of our cases, for example, at the hospitals that I work at, were done remotely at least in some phase. I think it'll be a balance. I think it'll be based on the specialty. I think it'll be heavily dependent on reimbursement. If that can be maintained, that can have an impact on it. So not an easy answer to address that. But what is clear is that technology will play a major role in how cancer care, how it's continued on. It may be a preference to have in-person visits for the initial consultation, for example, but the continuity of care could rely heavily on technology, whether that's using the Internet of Things with watches, measuring weights, predicting cardiac disease, preventing, monitoring pain for patients, and how the clinics interact with that data. That data is going to be increasing quite rapidly. And if you have to make a phone call or you have to come into the office every time it observed a medical change that needs intervention, that would overwhelm the health system. So long answer, but I do see that technology is going to play a role in making healthcare more efficient.
Thank you. think we have another polling question. We're going to move to the topic of cloud-based software. So Andrew, I think because you can't see this, I think that if I'm reading this correctly, there was kind of a tie on the poll. Responses somewhat using for certain products, but not all. And then the second tying is no security, loss of control over our own data concerns. Would you mind, Andrew, speaking to how COVID has changed Varian's trajectory with cloud-based tools?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for reading me the poll there. I appreciate that. It's kind of what I would have expected to see. I think it's similar to the way that we've thought about our strategy, right? So we're definitely, to the point that Dee was just making, feeling that the need for cloud-based tools and the ability to scale those tools and get them in the hands of users and the ease of use there is really critical and will only get more critical over time. But it's some of the barriers. I know one of the poll questions there was, no, it's too expensive, and I'm not surprised that that was not the highest response, because I think that it's coming down over time in terms of cost. But what we're really focused on is building the tools, and just as much we're focused on deploying tools. So the cloud infrastructure that we bring with us to customers and how we plug into their IT environment, and addressing some of what it seems like was in the response around sort of the security issues and the way that we connect with our customers. If we don't solve that, it will not be as impactful to bring. The tools will not be as impactful, right? They won't be able to be used. And so we can build things that are able to affect the day-to-day, able to improve the customer or the provider's way of practicing medicine, but they won't be able to actually use those tools to see those benefits all the way to the patient. And so we want to make sure that from a deployment standpoint and a scaling standpoint, and globally as well, right? So even what works in the US from an expense perspective doesn't always work in a developing market, even at the same price point. And so how do we think about this globally? And so, and again, the deployment of the tools. So there's the investment in building capabilities, then is the investment of getting those capabilities to customers and making them adoptable. And that's we're focused on both of those parts.
Thank you. Dee, would you provide us with an update on what's going on with Flash now, following up on the slide that you presented? And how does this also relate to comments made during President Biden's visit to the James?
All right, great. Thanks. Good question, Nancy. Yeah, I think so. In a couple of weeks ago, President Biden did visit Ohio State University and the Cancer Center. And, you know, he had some very provocative statements, including saying that you know, Flash therapy and immunotherapy are the future of cancer. And so that was certainly exciting for all of us, you know, at Varian to hear, but it really brought about quite a bit more awareness of what was, you know, what's to come. So getting into Flash, you know, this has really been the hottest topic to hit radiation oncology in the last couple of years. And we've been working on our program for about 5 years, and it included quite a bit of preclinical work involving animal studies. So we've completed, you know, many of those projects. We're now in humans, working directly with FDA. For the first time in the history of the company, we have an investigational device exemption for a radiation machine. So that was a big win. But there will be a series of clinical trials. We're already working with FDA on our second trial, all in an effort to bring that technology to market. This, we think will be the first technology that will be available to treat a wide variety of tumors, even deep-seated tumors. There are some other technologies out there that are predominantly for animal research only, but the systems we're working on are actually for human use. And to be part of that journey, that ride, has been, amazing for the folks at Varian, and it really, gets us excited to come to work every day, knowing that the work that's happening here is going to be able to benefit so many patients in the future.
Any comments you can make about timeline trajectory for FLASH being available?
Well, the good news is it's available now for clinical trials use. We're doing a bone metastases trial right now, and then we are working on another trial that will likely involve tumors that are in the chest, for example. But to tell you when it'll be available, where it'll be all no longer experimental, hard to say for sure. There's a lot of work that still needs to go on, from not just optimizing the software and the hardware, but there's the reimbursement side of this too, and it's a big task still ahead of us to get it ready to go.
Thank you. So the panel knows we have not yet received any questions in our chat box. So if you have any, please feel free to jump in now. I would like to thank the panel for their presentation and for the information they provided to everybody today on the webinar. ACE would like to thank you and would like to thank the participants. In the webinar, we have another one tomorrow. It's unusual to have them back to back about developing rehab program in oncology. We hope you can continue to the participants in joining us in the next series. And we also welcome our members to submit proposals for webinar presentation. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.